In the last video on this channel, we looked at the first eclogue of crap Latin poet Calpurnius Siculus. Though I must confess, I bear a personal grudge against that poet, which colours my view. Perhaps he's not quite as worthy of the scorn that I level against him. But in this video, we'll keep to the same theme, pastoral poetry, and take a somewhat similar approach, but this time I'm going to look at something that is really rather remarkable. Theocritus' first idyll, whose Song of Daphnis is, in my view, one of the darkest, most emotionally hard-hitting pieces of erotic, or rather anti-erotic, poetry that I think I know. Welcome to Ancient Classics. Theocritus is one of the key Hellenistic poets of the 3rd century BCE, alongside Callimachus and Apollonius. He was born in Sicily, and many of his poems, including the one we're looking at in this video, are set in Sicily. He's often cited as the founding father of the pastoral or bucolic poetic tradition. But genres and all that, it's all very difficult to pin down. On the one hand, the concept of the pastoral genre is a retrospective thing, crystallized by subsequent poets working in the field, like our buddy Calpurnius. On the other hand, there were surely generic precedents for pastoral, whether full-blown but now lost Greek pastoral poems, or germs of the genre found in other works, including Homer. Indeed, some of the main figures in the Odyssey are herdsmen. Odysseus' loyal swineherd Eumaeus for one, and the most famous literary shepherd of all time, Polyphemus, the Cyclops. Nonetheless, Theocritus' first idyll bears all the hallmarks of what became the pastoral genre, and perhaps indeed that's why this poem was placed first in the collection. And so, notwithstanding everything I've just said about the fluidity, artificiality, etc. of genre, with the passage of time, Theocritus' first idyll is not unreasonably considered by many to be the first pastoral poem proper, against which all others can be measured. Indeed, it's useful to compare the structure and form of Theocritus' first idyll and Calpurnius' first eclogue, which was featured in the previous video. Both begin and end with a narrative frame comprising a dialogue between two herdsmen. In the case of Theocritus' first, a shepherd named Thyrsis and an unnamed goat herd. Both poems also feature a long inset song, the Song of Faunus in the case of Calpurnius 1, and Thyrsis' Song of Daphnis in Theocritus 1. Theocritus, however, balances the two herdsmen's contributions through a long descriptive passage and Ecphrasis of a cup. To be frank though, I don't find most of this poem at all interesting apart from Thyrsis' Song of Daphnis, which is mind-blowing. I nearly omitted most of the poem from this video, but I want to keep the structural integrity of Theocritus' poem, so here goes. The whisper of the pine tree that sings beside the spring is sweet. Sweet too is the music you make with your syrinx, goat herd. You win a prize second only to Pan. And if he takes the horned goat, then you'll take the nanny goat. And if his prize is the nanny goat, then your prize shall be her kid. And the meat from a kid is fine until she matures. But shepherd, your song is sweeter than the resounding water that cascades from the rock. Now if the muses win as their prize the ewe, then your prize shall be the plump lambkin. And if they are awarded the plump lambkin, then you'll take the lamb. I beseech the nymphs, I beseech you, goat herd, sit here on this sloping bank by the tamarisks and play your syrinx while I watch over your goats. No, shepherd, it's taboo for me to play the syrinx at midday. I am in fear of Pan, for now is the time he rests, exhausted by the hunt. The god has a temper, and tends to bitter wrath. But you, Thyrsis, you sing the grief of Daphnis, for you are a master of bucolic song. So let's sit here beneath the elm, next to Priapus, the place of the water nymphs, where a shepherd may rest, and where the oak trees are. If you sing as you did when you competed with Chromis the Libyan, then I shall award you the right to milk 3 times a goat, the mother of twins. That's 2 pails full of milk left over from her 2 kids. And I'll award you this deep 2-handled cup coated with sweet wax, newly made, fresh engraved. Ivy curls around the rim. All around winds the ivy tendril, rejoicing, luxuriating in the yellow flowers. In the midst is pictured a woman, a godlike image, carved wearing a dress and diadem. Beside her, some long-haired men take turns competing for her, though her thoughts are elsewhere, and when she does look at one man, she just laughs, if she deigns to pay attention at all. Exhausted by desire, the men labour in vain. Beside them is depicted an aging fisherman and a craggy rock from which the old man labours to trawl in his net, just like a hard-working man would. You'd say he puts all his strength into fishing. His sinews are popping out of his neck, and, grizzled though he is, he has the strength of a youth. Close by the old sea-worn man, there's a vineyard, well laden with ripe grapes, and a young boy guards over it. He's sitting on a dry stone wall. Around him are 2 foxes, one of which sneaks among the vines, ravaging anything edible. The other fox has designs on the boy's lunchbox, and she won't let up until she's eaten up all his tasty snacks. But the boy's distracted. He's weaving a nice cage for crickets from asphodel stalks and rushes, and he's not paying attention to his lunchbox or the vines because he's too absorbed in making the cage. And succulent acanthus winds all around the cup. It's a wonderful piece of rustic handiwork, and you'll be amazed. So goes the goatherd's description of the cup that he is willing to offer to Thyrsis in return for a rendition of Thyrsis' song. The cup is described as a kysibion. That's a rare term for a cup. Etymologically, it means something to do with ivy, perhaps a reference to its decorative style. But what's really interesting about the word is its precedent usages in epic. I've already noted that the seeds of the pastoral tradition can be found in Homer's Odyssey, and 2 of that epic's most memorable characters, Eumaeus and Polyphemus the Cyclops, are, as I've said, herdsmen. And in the Odyssey, both those characters are described as drinking from or having a kysibion, like this cup here in Theocritus' poem. So, as a physical object, the cup provides a direct link back to the pastoral elements of the epic tradition. The cup features a depiction of a woman and her suitors, an old fisherman, and a boy who's supposed to be guarding a vineyard but is really too busy weaving a cage for a cricket and therefore oblivious to the foxes raiding the orchard and his lunch. Flaxman's rendering of the cup shows the images embossed on the outside, but perhaps one should instead imagine the cup as being carved on the inside, like this depiction here. That certainly was the line taken by Gall in a 1913 paper. Regardless of whether the images are on the inside or outside of the cup, its lengthy description is an archetypical ecphrasis, a poetic description of a work of art. The ecphrasis became a mainstay of the pastoral tradition, and before that it had already featured as a set piece in the epic tradition, notably the shield of Achilles in the Iliad and the shield of Heracles in the Shield of Heracles, both of which featured in my video on the Shield of Heracles. It's significant, of course, that those 2 famous epic ecphrases describe the trappings of war, shields, whereas Theocritus' Ecphrasis is on a cup, a vessel representative of pastoral otium, leisure, with its own epic connections to the herdsmen of the Odyssey. But the actual images depicted on the shield of Achilles and Heracles are themselves precursors to or sources of pastoral and adjacent domains. Indeed, the shield of Achilles depicts country songs and dances, among other things, and the shield of Heracles depicts a fisherman not too dissimilar from the fisherman described by Theocritus. I bought it off a ferryman from Calydna. It cost me a goat and a big cheese made from creamy milk, but it lies unsullied. I've not even sipped from it. But it's all yours to enjoy, if you'd be kind enough to sing that lovely song. I'm not kidding you. Come on, friend. It's not like you can save your song for the afterlife, when all will be forgotten. This is Thyrsis from Etna, and a sweet voice says, Thyrsis, where were you, nymphs? Where were you when Daphnis was dying? Were you in the beautiful valleys of Peneus or Pindos? Wherever you weren't at the streams of Anapos, nor at the cliffs of Etna, nor by the holy waters of Achis. The jackals, the wolves howled for Daphnis. The lion of the woods wept as he lay dead. Beside Daphnis many cows, many bulls, many heifers and calves grieved. But before Daphnis had died, Hermes had come from the mountains and had said, "Daphnis, what consumes you? Whom do you love so much? Whom do you love so very much, my friend?" Then came the cowherds, then came the shepherds, then came the goatherds. They all asked him what evil he suffered. Then Priapus said, "Wretched Daphnis, why are you wasting away? There's a girl looking for you at every spring and copse. And you're a cursed lover. You're useless. They say you're a cowherd, but you seem more like a goatherd, one who spies on rutting goats, and it pains him to watch because he is not the billy goat. And when you spy on the laughing girls, it pains you to watch because you are not dancing with them." The cowherd said nothing in response, but he bore his bitter love, and he bore it to his fated end. Then Aphrodite came and laughed at things pleasing to her, but a secret laugh, for she bore a heaviness in her heart and said, "You swore to wrestle Eros to the ground, Daphnis, but hasn't unconquerable Eros defeated you now?" And Daphnis responded, "Harsh Aphrodite, vengeful Aphrodite, Aphrodite hateful to mortals. Do you really think that all my sons have set? Even in Hades, I, Daphnis, will bring grief to Eros. It is said that a cowherd f***ed you, Aphrodite. So go to Ida, go to Anchises. There are the oaks, there the galangales, there the bees sweetly buzz about their hives. And Adonis is in season. Yes, he tends his flocks, shoots hares and hunts beasts. Go on, why don't you go up to Diomedes and say, 'I conquered the cowherd Daphnis, so fight me now.' Wolves, jackals, lurking mountain bears, farewell. I, Daphnis the herdsman, am now leaving you all, and I'm leaving the forests, the woods, the copses. Farewell, Arethusa, and you rivers who pour your lovely water by Thyrsis. I am Daphnis, the one who herded cows. Daphnis, who gave water to the bulls and calves. Pan, whether you reside at the great mountains of Lycaon or range upon great Minolos, come to this island of Sicily. Leave the steep peak of Helike and the barrow of Lycaon, revered by gods. Come here, Lord, and take this syrinx, fragrant with compacted wax, and its well-wrought mouthpiece. I am now making my way to Hades, sent by Eros. Now let brambles bear violets, and let the acanthus bear them too, and the narcissus adorn the junipers. May everything be perverted. May the pine tree bear fruit, because Daphnis is dying. May the deer chase the dogs, and the screech owls rival nightingales in song." With these words, he ended it. Aphrodite came to rouse him, but his fated life thread was exhausted, and Daphnis's life streamed away. The current flowed out of that man who was dear to the muses and not hated by the nymphs. So what the hell was Thyrsis' song of Daphnis all about? Who is Daphnis, and what kills him? It's sometimes assumed that Theocritus is alluding to a well-known myth or folktale, and that he assumes that the audience is familiar with the details, but I'd like to question that. The name Daphnis is a commonplace of the pastoral tradition. In later literature, the name became a generic signifier, if you like, a pastoral every boy. There are many characters bearing that name, most famously the titular Daphnis from Daphnis and Chloe of Longus and Ravel fame. But save for the generic affiliation, there's nothing linking the Daphnis of Thyrsis' song with most of his subsequent namesakes. There are accounts, though, of a mythical Daphnis, one who seems quite clearly to be a variant of the protagonist of this song. The two most fully realised accounts from ancient times are from Aelian, who's writing in the 3rd century AD, and Diodorus Siculus, who is writing in the 1st century BCE. I'll quote Diodorus since he's the earlier source, although still a couple of centuries after Theocritus, and because he is Sicilian too. There are in Sicily, namely the Heraean Mountains, which men say are naturally well suited to relaxation and enjoyment in the summer season. It was in this region that, as the myths relate, Daphnis was born, a son of Hermes and a nymph. He was raised by nymphs, and since he possessed many herds of cattle and gave great attention to their care, he was for this reason called by the name Bucolos. Being endowed with an unusual gift of song, he invented the bucolic or pastoral poem and the bucolic song, which continues to be so popular throughout Sicily to the present day. The myths add that Daphnis accompanied Artemis in her hunting, serving the goddess in an acceptable manner, and that with his shepherd's pipe and singing of pastoral songs he pleased her exceedingly. The story is also told that one of the nymphs became enamoured of him and prophesied to him that if he lay with another woman he would be deprived of his sight. And indeed, when once he had been made drunk by a daughter of a king and had lain with her, he was deprived of his sight in accordance with the prophecy delivered by the nymph. Aelian's description is similar to Diodorus's with a few minor differences. Now, there are certainly common touch points between Diodorus and Aelian's Daphnis and the Daphnis of Thyrsis' song in Theocritus Idyll 1. Both are herdsmen, both have an association with Hermes, and there is the sense of a dark erotic infatuation or something leading to a tragic end, but that's all. Both Aelian and Diodorus agree that Daphnis was blinded, whereas in Theocritus he dies, possibly at his own hand. And there is no mention in Theocritus of a jealous nymph, or even of a princess. Rather, we have the mysterious reference to a girl searching for Daphnis. Daphnis is also mentioned in another Theocritus poem, Idyll 7, wherein reference is made to a certain Tityrus and his song of Daphnis. And close by them Tityrus will sing how Daphnis the oxherd once loved Xenia, and how the mountains lamented for him, and the oak trees that grow on the banks of the river Himerus sang his dirge as he wasted away like snow. For absolute completeness, I should also note that Daphnis is one of the speaking characters in Theocritus' 8th Idyll, but I think that seems to me to be more Daphnis in the generic sense that I referred to earlier rather than this particular mythic character. So let's ignore the Daphnis from Idyll 8, but as for the one in Idyll 7, well, that version doesn't conflict with Thyrsis' song in Idyll 1, but it adds the additional detail that Daphnis loved a certain Xenia. Perhaps this Xenia is the same girl whom Priapus says is looking for Daphnis. Perhaps she is the princess from the versions recounted by Diodorus. Her name indicates, after all, that she is an outsider, and the princess figure is indeed an outsider to the rustic, peasant, pastoral world. So, to recap, Thyrsis' song of Daphnis in isolation is obscure. We do not know from the idyll alone quite what is wasting Daphnis away. Love seems to have something to do with it, but it's unclear whether Daphnis has been rejected, or perhaps he is just unable to find anyone he loves. Or maybe he is somehow physically or emotionally incapable, something hinted at when Priapus mockingly says that Daphnis is douceros, which means some kind of combination of dus as in dysfunction, and eros, i.e. to do with erotic love, or Priapus also calls him amekanos, a word made up of a privative or negative alpha, as in atonal, amoral, and mekanos, whence machine, mechanism. There are also hints of something perverse, something unnatural afoot. Priapus mocks Daphnis for spying upon dancing girls, wishing that he could join them, and compares it to a goat herd spying on rotting goats and fantasizing about joining in, like the billy goat. That comparison I find jarring on many levels. Why is fantasizing about young ladies the same thing as fantasizing over goats? Perhaps it is taboo, but why is it taboo? Perhaps this ties in with the nymph's curse. But back to the rotting goats and the pervy goat herd. We've also got to remember the dramatic context. Thyrsis, a shepherd, is singing the song, wherein Priapus says that goat herds want to shag goats. And well, who's Thyrsis' audience for the song? Who specifically requested the song? He's a goat herd. You might think that the goat herd would take umbrage at that reference to goat herds shagging goats. But he doesn't pick a fight over it. Okay, you might say, well, he's just trying to let it pass so he can move swiftly on. But he doesn't, as we'll see later in the poem. But back to the question of who is Daphnis and what is eating him up. We could try to integrate the story of the nymph's curse and the princess into this version of the Daphnis story, on the grounds that, for example, Daphnis might be under the curse and therefore knows that he cannot or must not love any other woman, though perhaps he wants to. Hence his boast, recounted by Aphrodite, that Daphnis would wrestle Eros. Perhaps the girl whom Priapus says is looking for Daphnis is the princess, and that it is the frustration and heartache of knowing that he must not or cannot love the princess that makes Daphnis die, rather than giving in to her and being blinded as the other versions of the tale have it. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the story that Theocritus is alluding to has nothing to do with those specific details. Perhaps Theocritus is not referring to any specific story at all. Perhaps he's even inventing an intentionally obscure myth, one with no backstory, and leaving everyone else to fill in the details. Recall that all the accounts of Daphnis that I've quoted post-date Theocritus. That feels to me like the most convincing theory, although there is no way for telling for sure. The Hellenistic poets were all for alluding to obscure versions of myths, alternate takes if you like, but they were also experimenters in literary form, and form, content, and mythology are interlinked. Perhaps just as Theocritus is creating a new genre, a new mode of poetry, he's also creating a new mythology for that genre, though just as this new pastoral genre is not entirely created out of nothing, but has its Homeric roots and so on, so this new mythology borrows certain aspects and characters from more familiar and conventional myths, such as Hermes, Priapus, Aphrodite, and all the myths of her dealings with mortals with which Daphnis taunts her. It seems to me that the setting is intentionally unclear and that we're not supposed to know what's really going on. This, of course, enables us to speculate and to project whatever we want onto Daphnis, whatever thoughts and feelings are triggered within us, even to project our own preoccupations, memories, regrets, desires, jealousies. Or we could project onto him anyone else we know, whom we love, whom we despise. So what or who is Daphnis to me? I don't quite know. Can't pin it down, nor do I believe I should, but despairing self-sabotage seems an overriding vibe to me. Now, I of course only scratched the surface. The Song of Daphnis is so open-ended that volumes could be written about it. But let's move on from those mystic psychosexual aspects and move back to matters of poetic form and genre. I find the very start of the song interesting. Thyrsis sings, "This is Thyrsis from Etna, and a sweet voice has Thyrsis." I like how he introduces himself. This trope is, according to Hunter, called a sphragis, a seal. It's pretty much like an MC announcing themselves in hip-hop. There are, to my mind, a lot of parallels between the conventions of pastoral poetry and hip-hop. The most obvious other example being the similarity between a Theban song, a pastoral convention wherein interlocutors exchange verses, responding, antagonizing, or indeed mocking each other, and the classic rap battle format. And I'm being serious here. I'm no expert in hip-hop, but it is something meriting further thought. Not saying that rap was influenced by the Theocritian pastoral or anything, but both traditions might be drawing on something common to human artistic expression. But enough of that for now, back to Theokritos. Thyrsis has concluded his Song of Daphnis, but there remains a final exchange between Thyrsis and the goat herd. So give me the goat and cup, so I may milk the goat and make libations to the muses. Farewell, muses. Many a farewell. I'll sing something sweeter next time. May your mouth be filled with honey and honeycomb, Thyrsis, and may you feast on Igalian figs, for you sing more sweetly than the cicada. So the cup is yours. See how fragrant it is. You'd think it had been washed at the spring of the Horai. Come now, Kissaitha. It's time for milking. Stop skipping about, she-goats, else the billy goat will be on to you. This kind of transition, wherein after a song or song contest the herdsmen go back to their pastoral day jobs, is typical for the genre, or rather it became typical after Theocritus. But the goat herd's reference to the mating habits of his goats is rather jarring. The Greek is not obscene, but it's clear enough what the goat herd means. Those words I've translated as, or else the billy goat will be on to you. So why does the goat herd suddenly lower the tone? Now, the fact that he frames the statement as a threat, an admonition to his nanny goats to get moving, shows that he is lowering the tone rather than just making a neutral observation, a kind of natural reflection of pseudo-rustic life. And it is especially jarring when you refer back to the passage in Thyrsis' song in which Priapus mocks Daphnis, comparing his longing for the dancing girls to a goat herd getting turned on by watching his goats ruts and fantasizes about joining in. So not only did the goat herd stand by listening to that song without picking a fight with Thyrsis for saying such things about goat herds, not only did he let it pass and conveniently forget about it, but as soon as the song is over, what does he do? He starts giving credence to the insult by talking about the sex lives of his goats. It's kind of weird and it's kind of creepy, but does it undermine the mystic tone of the song? I don't know. I really don't know. We don't know what we're being presented with here, and perhaps when this was a new genre in formation, neither would have Theocritus' audience. One thing is for sure, we're dealing with a new, raw genre here. Notwithstanding my reticence earlier to describe Theocritus as the founder of the pastoral tradition, it does feel to me that we are dealing here with a new, raw genre, whether born out of the traditions of genuine Sicilian rustics, extrapolated from epic or other earlier poetic traditions or whatever. We should forget the later ossified traditions of pastoral poetry and imagine a time when the rules of the game were still being set. So of course that is somehow obscure, like the Song of Daphnis, and unsettling, like all these references to pervy goat herds. Next time, no idea what next time. So until then, whatever it might be, like and subscribe, and we'll be back in due course.